Minji Park had been working for the State Labor Board for 7 years. Her job was simple but important. She made sure that recruiting agencies followed all the rules. These agencies helped people find jobs, and they needed special licenses to operate. Minji checked that they treated everyone fairly and kept proper records. Thursday morning started like any other day for Minji. She drank her coffee at her desk and looked at her schedule. Today she had to visit Tech Forward Recruiting Agency downtown. It was a surprise inspection. The agency did not know she was coming. This was normal. Surprise visits helped Minji see how agencies really operated when they were not preparing for an inspection. Minji packed her laptop, folders, and inspection checklist into her bag. She drove across the city to the tall glass building where Tech Forward had their office. The agency was on the 15th floor. Minji had visited many agencies over the years. Most of them followed the rules. A few did not. Those were the ones that lost their licenses. While Minji was parking her car, Jerome Washington was already sitting in his own car 2 blocks away. He was early for his interview. Jerome always arrived early to important meetings. He believed it showed respect and professionalism. He checked his reflection in the mirror one more time. His suit was neat. His tie was straight. He looked ready. Jerome was 32 years old and had worked as a software engineer for 8 years. He graduated from a top university with honors. He knew 5 programming languages. He had led teams of developers at his current company. His resume was impressive. Several companies wanted to hire him. Tech Forward had called him 3 times, eager to meet him. They said they had perfect opportunities for someone with his skills. He grabbed his leather portfolio from the passenger seat. Inside were copies of his resume, letters of recommendation, and examples of his work. Jerome felt confident but also a little nervous. Job interviews always made him slightly anxious, even though he was good at them. He took a deep breath and stepped out of his car. The building lobby was modern and clean. Jerome signed in at the security desk and got a visitor badge. The elevator ride to the 15th floor was quick. When the doors opened, he saw the Tech Forward logo on the glass doors ahead. The reception area looked professional. There were comfortable chairs, magazines on a coffee table, and large windows with a view of the city. A young receptionist smiled at Jerome when he approached her desk. "Good morning. How can I help you?" she asked. "I have an interview at 10 o'clock. My name is Jerome Washington," he said. The receptionist checked her computer screen. "Yes, Mr. Washington. You are meeting with Sarah Mitchell and Brad Thompson. Please have a seat. They will be with you in just a few minutes. Would you like some water or coffee?" "Water would be great." "Thank you," Jerome said. He sat down in one of the chairs and pulled out his tablet. He wanted to review his portfolio one more time before the interview started. At that same moment, Minji was stepping off the elevator. She walked to the reception desk with her official identification ready. "Good morning. I am Minji Park from the State Labor Board. I am here to conduct a compliance inspection," she said in her calm, professional voice. The receptionist's smile became a little nervous. "Oh, of course. Let me call the office manager right away." Jerome glanced up from his tablet. He noticed the woman with the official badge but did not think much about it. He went back to reviewing his work samples. A man in his 40s came out to meet Minji. He introduced himself as Robert Chen, the owner of Tech Forward. "Ms. Park, this is unexpected. We were not told about an inspection today," he said. He tried to sound calm, but Minji could hear the worry in his voice. "That is correct, Mr. Chen. This is a routine surprise inspection. All licensed agencies receive them. I will need access to your files, employment records, and security camera system. I also need a private office where I can work," Minji explained. She had given this speech many times before. Robert nodded. "Of course. We have nothing to hide. Let me show you to our back office. You can use that space. I will have my assistant bring you whatever files you need." Minji followed Robert through the office. She noticed the layout as they walked. There were several small offices along one wall and a large conference room with glass walls in the center. The conference room had a long table and chairs. She could see everything inside from the hallway. That was the room where interviews happened. Minji knew this because the room had a small sign on the door that said, "Interview Room." Robert showed Minji to a quiet office in the back. It had a desk, a computer, and a filing cabinet. "Will this work for you?" he asked. "This is perfect. I need access to your security camera feeds. Do you record your interviews? Minji asked. Yes, we do. It is for quality control and training purposes. All our candidates sign consent forms. The system is digital. I can have someone set you up with access right away, Robert said. Good, please do that. I also need your licensing renewal applications from the past 3 years, your placement records, and any complaints you have received from candidates or clients, Minji said. She was already opening her laptop and setting up her workspace. Robert left to gather the materials. Minji opened her inspection checklist. She would review the files first, then watch some security footage. She liked to see how agencies conducted their interviews. Most were professional and fair. Some were not. The camera footage always told the truth. Back in the reception area, Jerome heard voices approaching. 2 people walked into the lobby. A woman in her late 30s with blonde hair and a man about the same age with dark hair and glasses. They both wore business clothes and carried tablets. Mr. Washington, I am Sarah Mitchell, and this is Brad Thompson. We are so glad you could come in today, the woman said. She shook Jerome's hand with a firm grip. Brad did the same. Thank you for inviting me. I am excited to learn more about the opportunities you mentioned on the phone, Jerome said. He stood up and followed them toward the glass conference room. They all sat down at the long table. Sarah and Brad sat on one side. Jerome sat across from them. He placed his portfolio on the table in front of him. The glass walls made the room feel open. Jerome liked that. Some interview rooms felt too small and uncomfortable. So, Jerome, tell us about your current role. Sarah began. She smiled and looked at her tablet, ready to take notes. Jerome relaxed a little. This seemed like a normal interview. He started describing his work as a senior software engineer. He talked about the projects he had led, the teams he had managed, and the systems he had built. Sarah and Brad both nodded and asked follow-up questions. They seemed interested and engaged. In the back office, Minji had just logged into the security camera system. She could see multiple camera feeds on her screen. One camera pointed at the reception area. Another showed the hallway. 2 cameras covered different angles of the glass conference room. She could see 3 people sitting at the table. One of them was the man who had been waiting in the lobby when she arrived. Minji clicked on the conference room feed and turned up the volume. She could hear the interview clearly. This was standard procedure. She always watched a few interviews during her inspections. It helped her understand how the agency treated candidates. She pulled up her notepad and started watching. The interview seemed normal so far. Professional questions, polite responses, nothing unusual. Jerome was answering a question about cloud architecture when his phone buzzed in his pocket. He glanced at the screen quickly. It was his current boss. I apologize, but I need to take this call. It is from my current employer. It will just be 1 minute, Jerome said. Of course, no problem. Take your time, Brad said. Jerome stepped out of the conference room and walked a few steps down the hallway. He answered the call. His boss needed quick information about a project deadline. Jerome gave him the details he needed. The call took less than 2 minutes. Inside the conference room, Sarah and Brad were alone. They thought no one could hear them. They did not know that Minji was watching and listening to everything through the security camera system. What happened next would change everything for all of them. The moment Jerome stepped out of the conference room, Sarah leaned back in her chair. She watched him walk down the hallway with his phone pressed to his ear. Then she turned to Brad with a look that made him grin. Well, what do you think so far? Sarah asked. Her professional smile had disappeared. Brad glanced toward the hallway to make sure Jerome was far enough away. He sounds good on paper. Great resume. But I do not know. Something feels off to me. In the back office, Minji was still watching the camera feed. She had been about to switch to a different camera when she noticed the change in the recruiter's body language. Something made her pause. She leaned closer to her laptop screen and turned the volume up slightly. Sarah laughed quietly. Did you notice how he talks? Very urban. I am not sure our corporate clients would respond well to that style. You know how conservative some of them are. Minji's eyes narrowed. She reached for her notepad and started writing. She noted the exact time on the video feed, 10:17 a.m. She wrote down exactly what Sarah had said. The word urban was often code for something else. Minji had heard it before during other investigations. Brad nodded and lowered his voice even more. And that hairstyle. I mean, I get it. People want to express themselves. But is that really the image we want to present to clients? We have a reputation to maintain. Jerome's hair was cut short and neat. There was nothing unprofessional about it. Minji wrote down Brad's comment word for word. Her jaw tightened. This was not just casual conversation. This was the beginning of discrimination. She had seen it many times before. It always started with small comments about appearance or speaking style. Sarah picked up her tablet and pretended to review Jerome's resume, but she was not really reading it. Look at this. 8 years of experience. Top university. Led multiple projects. It all sounds perfect. Almost too perfect, if you know what I mean. Affirmative action? Brad asked quietly. I am not saying that. I am just saying we need to really dig into his background. Make sure these accomplishments are real and not just handed to him because companies needed to meet their diversity quotas, Sarah said. She said it in a way that made it sound reasonable, but her meaning was clear. Minji felt her stomach tighten. She had been doing compliance inspections for 7 years. She had seen discrimination happen in many forms. Sometimes it was obvious. Sometimes it was hidden behind careful words. But it was always wrong. She clicked to save the video segment. This was serious evidence. Brad leaned forward and put his elbows on the table. So what do? We cannot just reject him without cause. That would be a lawsuit waiting to happen. Sarah waved her hand dismissively. Of course not. We are smarter than that. We just ask him questions that make it clear he is not the right fit. We focus on culture fit. We can say he does not match what our clients are looking for. That is perfectly legal. Culture fit. Right, that works, Brad agreed. He glanced toward the hallway again. Jerome was still on his phone call, turned slightly away from them. Sarah suddenly did an imitation of Jerome's voice. She made it deeper, and added an exaggerated tone that was meant to sound like how she thought Jerome spoke. Yo, I am here for the interview. I got all these skills and stuff. She said it with a mocking smile. Brad laughed and shook his head. Stop it, that is terrible. But he was laughing as he said it. He was not telling her to stop because it was offensive. He was laughing because he thought it was funny. Minji's hand gripped her pen tighter. She felt anger rising in her chest, but she kept her face calm and professional. She had learned over the years not to react emotionally during investigations. She needed to stay focused and gather all the evidence. Her feelings did not matter right now. The facts mattered. The law mattered. Protecting people like Jerome mattered. Sarah was still smiling. Honestly, I am tired of these interviews where we have to pretend everyone is qualified. Some people just do not belong in certain environments. Our clients pay us good money to find the right candidates, the right fit. And sometimes that means being selective about things we cannot put in writing. Exactly. That is why these face-to-face interviews are so important. We can weed people out in person without leaving a paper trail. Email is too risky. But in person we can make our own judgments, Brad said. He tapped his tablet screen as if making a point. Minji was writing as fast as she could. Every word mattered. Weed people out. No paper trail. These were not innocent mistakes. This was intentional discrimination. This was a system designed to reject candidates based on race while hiding behind words like culture fit and client preferences. She glanced at her laptop screen and saw Jerome ending his phone call. He turned back toward the conference room. Sarah and Brad must have noticed too because they both suddenly sat up straighter. Their faces changed instantly. The mocking smiles disappeared. They both looked at their tablets as if they had been working the whole time. Jerome walked back into the conference room and sat down. Sorry about that. My boss needed some quick information. Where were we? He smiled, ready to continue the interview. He had no idea what had just been said about him. Sarah's voice was professional again, but it sounded different now. The warmth was gone. No problem at all. We were just reviewing your resume. So you mentioned you have experience with team leadership. Tell me about a time when you had to deal with a difficult team member. It was a standard interview question, but Sarah asked it in a flat tone. She was not really interested in his answer anymore. Minji could see it in her body language on the camera. Sarah had already made up her mind. Jerome started to answer the question. He told a detailed story about a project where one team member was not communicating well with the others. He explained how he had one-on-one meetings with the person, identified the root problem, and created a solution that made the whole team work better together. It was a good answer. It showed leadership, empathy, and problem-solving skills. But Sarah and Brad barely reacted. Sarah took a few notes but did not ask any follow-up questions. Brad just nodded once and looked at his tablet. In a normal interview, they would have asked more about the situation. They would have wanted details. But they were not interested anymore. That is fine. Good answer, Sarah said quickly. Brad, do you have any questions? Brad looked up from his tablet. Yes, Jerome, what kind of work environment do you prefer? Are you more comfortable in startup culture or corporate culture? It was a trap question. Minji recognized it immediately. No matter how Jerome answered, they could use it against him. If he said startup culture, they could say their clients wanted corporate experience. If he said corporate culture, they could say he was too rigid. The question was designed to create an excuse for rejection. Jerome thought about the question for a moment. I think I work well in both environments. I started my career at a small startup where I wore many different hats. Then I moved to a larger corporation where I learned about processes and scale. I think the best environment is one where teams communicate well and focus on solving real problems. That can happen in any size company. It was a diplomatic answer. Jerome was trying to show flexibility. But Sarah and Brad were not really listening. Sarah wrote something on her tablet. Brad checked his watch as if he was bored or had somewhere else to be. The interview continued for another 10 minutes, but the energy had completely changed. Sarah asked short, simple questions. Brad asked almost nothing. They did not laugh at Jerome's small jokes. They did not lean forward with interest when he described his accomplishments. They just wanted the interview to end. Minji watched all of it. She saw how Jerome's confidence started to fade. He could feel the shift in the room even though he did not understand why it happened. He started giving shorter answers. His shoulders tensed up a little. He knew something was wrong, but he had no idea what it was. Finally, Sarah closed her tablet cover. Well, Jerome, I think we have all the information we need for now. We have several other candidates to interview this week. We will review everyone and get back to you within a few days. It was a polite rejection. Minji had heard similar words many times. We will get back to you usually meant, we are not interested. Most candidates never heard from the agency again after hearing those words. Jerome stood up and shook hands with both of them. Thank you for your time. I look forward to hearing from you. He picked up his portfolio and walked out of the conference room with his head high. He was professional until the very end. Sarah and Brad stayed in the conference room for a moment after Jerome left. They waited until they heard the elevator doors close. Then Brad let out a long breath. Well, that was awkward. I hate doing these interviews when we already know the answer. It is part of the job. We have to go through the motions. At least we did not waste too much time, Sarah said. She was already looking at her tablet, moving on to the next task. Who do we have this afternoon? 2 more interviews. Both look more promising. Better fit for what our clients actually want, Brad said. He stood up and stretched. I need more coffee before the next one. Jerome sat in his car in the parking garage for a long time before starting the engine. The interview kept replaying in his mind. Something had changed halfway through. The warmth had disappeared. The interest had vanished. He could not figure out what he had done wrong. He had answered every question well. He had been professional and friendly. His resume was strong. His experience was exactly what they said they were looking for. But then everything shifted. After that phone call, Sarah and Brad had treated him like they just wanted him to leave. Jerome pulled out his phone and opened his notes app. He typed everything he could remember about the interview while it was still fresh in his mind. The questions they asked, the moment when things changed, the way they rushed through the last 10 minutes. He had learned to document these experiences. This was not the first time an interview had gone strangely. It probably would not be the last. He started his car and drove back to his office. He had taken the morning off for the interview, but he had work to finish in the afternoon. As he drove, he thought about calling his mentor, Professor James Collins. Professor Collins had been his advisor in university. They had stayed in touch over the years. The professor had helped Jerome navigate difficult situations before. Meanwhile, back at Tech Forward, Minji was deep into her investigation. After her call with Daniel, she had spent the last hour reviewing the agency's records. She pulled up their placement history for the past year. Tech Forward had interviewed over 300 candidates and successfully placed 200 of them in jobs. Minji created a spreadsheet. She started sorting the data by candidate names. Many names gave clues about ethnicity. She saw patterns emerging. Most of the successfully placed candidates had European or Anglo names. Very few had names that suggested African, Asian, or Hispanic backgrounds. This was not proof by itself, but it was a red flag. She went back to the security camera system. Tech Forward kept video recordings of all interviews for 90 days. Minji randomly selected 10 interviews from the past month. She wanted to see if Jerome's experience was unusual or part of a pattern. The first interview she watched was a young woman named Emily Parker. She was white with blonde hair. Sarah and Brad interviewed her in the same conference room. Minji watched carefully. The recruiters smiled throughout the interview. They asked engaging questions. They laughed at Emily's jokes. They spent 45 minutes with her. At the end, Sarah said they had perfect positions for someone with her skills. They would call her within 2 days. Minji checked the placement records. Emily Parker had been placed in a job within 1 week. The second interview was a man named Carlos Rodriguez. He was Hispanic with an accent that suggested Spanish was his first language. Minji watched Sarah and Brad interview him. The atmosphere was different. They were polite but distant. They asked fewer questions. The interview lasted only 20 minutes. At the end, they said they would review his qualifications and be in touch. Their tone was the same tone they had used with Jerome. Minji checked the records. Carlos Rodriguez was never placed. There was no follow-up communication in his file. The third interview made Minji's stomach turn. The candidate was a black woman named Keisha Brown. She was qualified with 6 years of marketing experience. But when Keisha mentioned she had 2 young children, Sarah and Brad exchanged a look. After Keisha left, Brad said to Sarah, "She has kids. That means she probably cannot work late or travel. Our clients need commitment." Minji wrote down everything. She noted the timestamp. This was another clear case of discrimination. This time it was not just about race. It was also about family status. Employers could not reject candidates because they had children. That was illegal. She continued watching interviews. Out of 10 random interviews, 6 showed some form of discrimination. Candidates of color were treated coldly. Women were asked inappropriate questions about family plans. Older candidates were told they might not fit with the company's young, energetic culture. It was all code. It was all illegal. Minji pulled up Tech Forward's licensing history. The agency had been in business for 8 years. Robert Chen had opened it after working as a recruiter at a larger firm. The agency had grown quickly. They made good money. Their license had been renewed every year without problems. But then Minji found something interesting. There were 2 informal complaints in the file from previous years. Both complaints came from candidates who felt they had been discriminated against. One was from an Asian man who said he was rejected despite being qualified. Another was from a black woman who said the interview felt hostile. Both complaints had been noted in the file but never fully investigated. The person who handled them had contacted Tech Forward and asked for their side of the story. Robert Chen had responded with professional letters explaining that the candidates simply were not the right fit for their clients' needs. He provided documentation of their interview notes. Everything looked proper on paper. The complaints had been closed without action. Minji now understood why. Tech Forward was careful. They did not put discrimination in writing. They did not send emails saying they rejected someone because of race. They did it in person during interviews. They did it in private conversations after candidates left. They created a paper trail that looked clean while hiding their real reasons. This was exactly why surprise inspections with camera access were so important. Without the video evidence, Minji would have only had Jerome's word against the agency's documentation. But now she had proof. She spent the next 2 hours creating a detailed report. She documented each problematic interview with timestamps, descriptions, and direct quotes. She noted the patterns and placement data. She referenced the previous complaints that had been dismissed. She explained how the agency had created a system to discriminate while maintaining plausible deniability. When she finished, Minji sent the report to Daniel. Then she made certified copies of all the video evidence. She burned the files to a secure drive. She printed out the placement data. She gathered all the physical files about previous complaints. Everything needed to be preserved exactly. This evidence would be needed for the formal hearing. Her phone rang. It was Daniel. "Minji, I read your report. This is worse than I thought. We are not just dealing with one bad interview. This is systematic discrimination. The legal team is preparing emergency suspension documents right now. How long do you need to finish gathering evidence? I have everything I need for the suspension, but I want to contact some of the candidates who were discriminated against. They deserve to know what happened. They might want to file formal complaints, Minji said. Good idea, but be careful. We cannot discuss our investigation in detail until after the suspension is served. You can contact them and let them know we are reviewing their cases. Give them information about how to file complaints. But do not tell them about the pending suspension yet. We do not want word getting back to the agency before we serve the papers, Daniel explained. Understood. I will be discreet, Minji said. She pulled up the contact information for the candidates she had seen on video. Carlos Rodriguez, Keisha Brown, a man named David Nguyen who had been stereotyped during his interview, an older woman named Patricia Wilson who had been told she would not fit the culture. Minji composed a careful email to each of them. The email explained that the State Labor Board was reviewing tech-forward recruiting agencies' practices. She said their interview had been flagged during a routine inspection. She provided information about how to file a formal discrimination complaint if they felt they had been treated unfairly. She included her direct phone number and email address. Minji sent the emails one by one. She knew some people might not respond. Filing complaints took time and energy. Some people just wanted to move on, but others would want justice. They deserved the chance to be heard. That evening, Jerome was at home making dinner when he decided to call Professor Collins. The interview was still bothering him. He needed to talk to someone who would understand. Professor Collins answered cheerfully. Jerome, how are you? I have not heard from you in a few weeks. I am okay, Professor. But I had a strange experience today. I wanted to get your advice, Jerome said. He explained the whole interview. He described how well it started and how suddenly it changed. He talked about the cold treatment after his phone call. He admitted that he felt confused and frustrated. Professor Collins listened quietly. When Jerome finished, the professor sighed. Jerome, I hate to say this, but what you are describing sounds very familiar. I have heard similar stories from many of my former students, especially students of color. Companies and agencies sometimes use these tactics. They go through the motions of an interview, but they have already decided against you for reasons they will never say out loud. So what do I do? Just accept it? Jerome asked. He heard the frustration in his own voice. No. You document everything, which you already did. That is good. Then you file a complaint with the State Labor Board. They handle discrimination cases involving employment agencies. Even if nothing comes of it, there needs to be a record. If this agency is doing this to you, they are doing it to others, Professor Collins said firmly. Jerome thought about it. Filing a complaint felt big. It felt official. Part of him just wanted to forget about the interview and move on. But Professor Collins was right. If he did nothing, the behavior would continue. Okay, I will file a complaint tomorrow. Can you help me write it? I want to make sure I include all the right information, Jerome said. Of course. Email me your notes. We will work on it together. And Jerome, I am proud of you for speaking up. I know it is not easy, Professor Collins said warmly. After they hung up, Jerome felt a little better. At least he was doing something. He opened his laptop and started writing a detailed account of the interview. He included dates, times, names, and specific examples of how the recruiter's behavior changed. He described exactly what questions they asked and how they responded. He noted how quickly they ended the interview. It took him 2 hours to write everything down. When he finished, he sent it to Professor Collins. Then he looked up the State Labor Board website. He found the section about filing discrimination complaints. The website had a form he could fill out online. Jerome bookmarked it. He would complete it tomorrow with Professor Collins's help. He did not know that Minji Park already had video evidence of exactly what he had experienced. He did not know that his complaint would arrive just as the investigation was reaching its critical point. He did not know that within days Tech Forward would be shut down. That night, Minji worked late at the Labor Board office. She wanted to finish organizing all the evidence before going home. She created a master timeline showing all the discriminatory interviews. She cross-referenced them with placement data. She prepared exhibits for the formal hearing. Everything needed to be perfect. Around 8 o'clock at night, she received an email notification. Someone had filled out a discrimination complaint form on the Labor Board website. The complaint had been automatically assigned to her department since she was the lead inspector for recruiting agencies. Minji opened the complaint. Her eyes widened as she read the name Jerome Washington. She quickly read through his detailed description of the interview. He described arriving on time, the professional beginning, the phone call from his boss, and the sudden change in attitude. He noted the rushed ending and the cold dismissal. Jerome had no idea that Minji had been there. He had no idea that she had watched everything on camera. His complaint described the exact same interview from his perspective. It matched perfectly with what Minji had witnessed. This was important. Jerome's first-hand account combined with the video evidence would be powerful in the hearing. He could testify about what he experienced while Minji could testify about what she saw. The agency would have no defense. Minji immediately called Daniel, even though it was late. "Daniel, you need to hear this. The candidate from the interview I witnessed this morning just filed a formal complaint. He has no idea I was watching. His account matches the video evidence exactly." Daniel let out a low whistle. "That strengthens our case significantly. Having his testimony plus the video is perfect. Reach out to him first thing tomorrow. Let him know you have evidence that supports his complaint. We need to get his full statement on record. I will contact him at 9 a.m. Daniel, this is going to be a big case. The evidence is overwhelming." "How soon can we serve the suspension?" Minji asked. "The legal team is finalizing the paperwork tonight. We should be ready to serve it by tomorrow afternoon." "Can you be there when we do it?" "I want you to explain the evidence directly to the agency owner. You found it. You should present it," Daniel said. "I will be there." "Let me know what time," Minji said. She felt a sense of satisfaction. This was why she did this job. This was why she spent long hours reviewing files and watching camera footage. Moments like this, when she could stop discrimination and protect people, made all the work worthwhile. She closed her laptop and packed up her things. Tomorrow was going to be a very important day. Friday morning arrived with clear skies. Jerome woke up early, feeling more determined than he had the day before. He made coffee and sat at his kitchen table with his laptop. Professor Collins had reviewed his complaint draft late last night and sent back some suggestions. Now Jerome needed to finalize it and submit it officially. He opened the State Labor Board website and found the complaint form again. He typed carefully, making sure every detail was accurate. He described the date and time of the interview. He named Sarah Mitchell and Brad Thompson as the recruiters. He explained how professional the interview started and how dramatically it changed after his phone call. He noted specific questions they asked and how their tone became cold and dismissive. In the section asking what he believed happened, Jerome wrote carefully, "I believe I was discriminated against based on my race. The recruiters seemed interested in hiring me until they saw me in person. After I stepped out of the room briefly, their entire attitude changed. They rushed through the rest of the interview and made it clear they were not interested in placing me with any of their clients." Jerome paused before clicking submit. This felt serious. Once he filed this complaint, there would be an official record. The labor board would investigate. Tech Forward would be questioned. Part of him worried about being seen as a troublemaker in the recruiting industry. But Professor Collins' words came back to him. If he did nothing, the behavior would continue. He clicked submit. The screen showed a confirmation message. "Your complaint has been received. A compliance officer will contact you within 3 business days. Your complaint number is 2025 TR0847. Jerome wrote down the number. He felt relieved. At least he had done something. Even if nothing came of it, he had stood up for himself. He closed his laptop and got ready for work. At that exact moment, Minji was walking into her office at the State Labor Board. She set down her coffee and opened her computer. The first thing she did every morning was check the complaint system. She saw that Jerome's complaint had arrived in her queue overnight. She opened it and read through it carefully, even though she already knew the basic story. Jerome's written complaint was detailed and clear. He had documented everything methodically. This would be very helpful during the hearing. Minji appreciated people who took the time to file thorough complaints. It made her job easier and made the case stronger. She checked the timestamp. Jerome had submitted the complaint at 7:30 that morning. He was an early riser like she was. Minji picked up her phone and dialed the number Jerome had provided. Jerome was driving to his office when his phone rang. He answered through his car's Bluetooth system. "This is Jerome." Good morning, Mr. Washington. My name is Minji Park. I'm a compliance officer with the State Labor Board. I am calling about the complaint you filed this morning regarding Tech Forward Recruiting Agency, Minji said in her professional voice. Jerome felt his heart beat faster. Oh, hello. Thank you for calling so quickly. I just submitted it an hour ago. Yes, I saw it come through. Mr. Washington, I need to tell you something important. I was at Tech Forward conducting a surprise compliance inspection on Thursday when you had your interview. I witnessed what happened to you, Minji said. She paused to let that information sink in. Jerome was shocked. You were there? You saw the interview? Yes. I was reviewing security camera footage as part of my inspection. The interview room has cameras with audio. I watched and recorded your entire interview. I heard what the recruiters said about you when you stepped out to take your phone call. Everything you described in your complaint matches exactly what I witnessed on video, Minji explained. Jerome had to pull over to the side of the road. His hands were shaking slightly. What did they say when I was out of the room? Minji chose her words carefully. They made comments about your appearance and the way you speak. They questioned whether your qualifications were real or if you had received them through affirmative action. They discussed how to reject you without leaving a written record. Mr. Washington, what happened to you was clear racial discrimination, and I have video evidence of it. Jerome sat in his car in silence for a long moment. He felt anger, relief, and validation all at the same time. He had known something was wrong. But hearing that someone official had witnessed it and had proof made it real. I cannot believe this. I mean, I can believe it happened. But I cannot believe you actually saw it and have proof. I understand. This is a lot to process, Mr. Washington. I need to meet with you today if possible. I need to get your full statement on record. We are moving forward with an emergency license suspension of Tech Forward. Your testimony combined with the video evidence will be crucial, Minji said. You are shutting them down? Jerome asked. Yes, their license is being suspended today. They will not be allowed to operate as a recruiting agency while we conduct a full investigation and formal hearing. What they did to you violates multiple state employment laws. And my investigation shows you are not the only candidate they have discriminated against, Minji explained. Jerome felt a wave of emotion. Other people had gone through this too. He had not been wrong about what he felt. When can we meet? I can come to your office right away if needed. Can you come at 11 o'clock this morning? I know it is short notice, but we are serving the suspension papers this afternoon. I want to have your complete statement before we do that, Minji said. I will be there at 11. Thank you, Ms. Park. Thank you for paying attention. Thank you for taking this seriously, Jerome said. His voice was thick with emotion. It is my job, Mr. Washington, but more than that, it is the right thing to do. I will see you at 11, Minji said. After the call ended, Jerome sat in his car for a few more minutes. He texted his boss and said he needed to take a personal day. Then he called Professor Collins and told him everything. The professor was thrilled and proud. He offered to come to the meeting with Jerome as support. Jerome accepted gratefully. At 10:30, Jerome and Professor Collins walked into the State Labor Board building. It was a government office building downtown. They checked in at the security desk and took the elevator to the 4th floor. Minji met them in the waiting area. She shook hands with both of them. Thank you for coming on such short notice, Minji said. She led them to a small conference room. It had a table, some chairs, and recording equipment. I am going to record your statement if that is okay. This will be used as evidence in the formal hearing. That is fine, Jerome said. He felt nervous but also strangely calm. He was finally going to tell the whole story to someone who would listen and believe him. Minji started the recording equipment and stated the date, time, and who was present in the room. Then she asked Jerome to describe the entire interview in his own words from beginning to end. She did not interrupt. She just let him talk. Jerome described everything. Arriving early, meeting Sarah and Brad, the professional start to the interview. His boss's phone call, coming back to a completely different atmosphere. The cold questions, the rushed ending, the feeling that something had gone wrong but not understanding what it was. When he finished, Minji asked him some specific questions. When you first met Sarah and Brad, how did they treat you? They were friendly, professional. They smiled and shook my hand firmly. Sarah said she was glad I could come in. They seemed genuinely interested in my background, Jerome answered. And after you came back from the phone call, how had that changed? The warmth was gone. They barely made eye contact. Their questions were short and simple. They did not ask follow-up questions. It felt like they just wanted me to leave. Sarah kept looking at her watch. Brad just nodded at my answers without really responding, Jerome explained. Minji showed him some still images from the video footage. Is this the conference room where the interview took place? Jerome nodded. Yes, that is it. And these are Sarah Mitchell and Brad Thompson. Minji showed him images of the two recruiters. Yes, those are them. Minji then did something Jerome was not expecting. She played a short clip of audio from the video. It was Sarah's voice saying, "Did you notice how he talks? Very urban. I am not sure our corporate clients would respond well to that style." Jerome's jaw tightened as he heard it. Hearing those words made it real in a way that just knowing about them had not. That is what she said about me? Yes. That is from the video recording about 2 minutes after you left the conference room. There is more, but I do not need to play all of it right now unless you want to hear it. The full video will be presented at the hearing, Minji said gently. Jerome shook his head. I do not need to hear more right now. I believe you. He looked at Professor Collins, who squeezed his shoulder supportively. Mr. Washington, I want you to know that what happened to you is not your fault. You did nothing wrong. You were professional, qualified, and prepared. You were rejected because of discrimination, which is illegal. The state takes this very seriously, Minji said. Jerome took a deep breath. Thank you. That means a lot to hear from someone official. Sometimes you think maybe you are imagining things. Maybe you are being too sensitive. But I knew something was wrong. I just could not prove it. Well, now you can. Now we all can, Minji said. She turned off the recording equipment. That is everything I need for now. The formal hearing will be scheduled in about 2 weeks. You will be called as a witness. The agency has the right to defend themselves, but the evidence is very strong. Professor Collins spoke up. What happens if they lose their license permanently? They will not be able to operate as a recruiting agency in this state. The owner, Robert Chen, could apply for a new license in the future after completing mandatory anti-discrimination training and paying substantial fines. But the agency itself as it exists now will be shut down. Sarah Mitchell and Brad Thompson will have their individual recruiter licenses revoked. They will not be able to work in this field anymore, Minji explained. Jerome felt mixed emotions about that. Part of him was glad they would face real consequences. Part of him felt strange about people losing their jobs, even people who had discriminated against him. But mostly he felt relief. They would not be able to do this to anyone else. There is one more thing, Minji said. My investigation found that other candidates have also been discriminated against by this agency. Some of them have already been contacted by our office. Others may come forward once they learn about the investigation. You may not be alone at the hearing. There may be other witnesses sharing similar experiences. Jerome nodded slowly. How many others? I found evidence of discrimination in at least 6 interviews over the past month alone. If we looked back further, I suspect we would find more. This was not an isolated incident. This was their standard practice, Minji said. That is horrible, Professor Collins said. How many people were denied opportunities because of this? We may never know the full number, but we can stop it from happening going forward. That is what today is about, Minji said. She stood up and shook hands with both of them again. Thank you for your courage in filing the complaint, Mr. Washington. You did the right thing. Jerome and Professor Collins left the building. It was almost noon. They decided to get lunch together and talk about everything that had happened. Jerome felt emotionally exhausted but also strangely energized. For the first time since the interview, he felt like he had some power in the situation. Meanwhile, back at her office, Minji was preparing for the suspension. Daniel had called and said the legal team was ready. They would serve the papers at 2 o'clock. Minji gathered all her evidence files into a secure folder. She made sure she had copies of the key video clips on a tablet, so she could show them to Robert Chen when they arrived. At 1:30, Minji met Daniel and 2 other labor board officials in the lobby. They also had a police officer with them. The officer was there as an official witness and to handle any problems if people became upset or angry. Serving suspension papers could sometimes lead to tense situations. They drove to Tech Forward's office building in 2 cars. Minji felt focused and calm. She had done this part of her job many times before, but it never stopped feeling important. Every time she shut down an agency that was breaking the law, she was protecting workers and job seekers. She was making the system a little bit fairer. The group rode the elevator to the 15th floor. Minji led them through the glass doors with the Tech Forward logo. The receptionist looked up in surprise at seeing so many official-looking people. "Can I help you?" she asked nervously. "We need to speak with Robert Chen immediately." "This is official state business," Daniel said. He showed his credentials. The receptionist picked up her phone with shaking hands. "Mr. Chen, there are people here from the State Labor Board. They say it is urgent." She listened for a moment. "He is coming right out." Robert Chen emerged from his office looking confused and worried. He recognized Minji from the day before. "Ms. Park, what is going on? I gave you full access to everything yesterday. Is there a problem?" Daniel stepped forward. "Mr. Chen, I am Daniel Kim, supervisor of the Compliance Division. We are here to serve you with an official notice. Your agency's license is being suspended effective immediately for violations of state employment discrimination laws." Robert's face went pale. "What, suspended? There must be some mistake." Daniel handed Robert a thick envelope with official seals on it. "There is no mistake, Mr. Chen. Please open this and read the contents." Robert's hands trembled slightly as he opened the envelope. He pulled out several pages of official documents. His eyes scanned the first page quickly, then more slowly as he realized what he was reading. The words "emergency license suspension" were printed in bold letters at the top. "I do not understand. We have always followed the rules. We passed every previous inspection," Robert said. His voice had lost its confident tone. He sounded confused and frightened. Minji stepped forward. "Mr. Chen, during my inspection yesterday, I witnessed clear racial discrimination during a candidate interview. I have video evidence with audio of your recruiters engaging in discriminatory behavior. I also found a pattern of similar behavior in other interviews." "What interview? What are you talking about?" Robert asked. But then his eyes widened. "Wait, are you talking about the cameras? You were watching the interviews?" "Yes, that is part of my inspection process. I review interview footage to ensure agencies are treating all candidates fairly. Yesterday morning, your recruiters Sarah Mitchell and Brad Thompson interviewed a candidate named Jerome Washington. After Mr. Washington briefly left the room, your recruiters made racist comments about his appearance and speech. They questioned his qualifications based on racial stereotypes. They discussed how to reject him without leaving a written record of their discriminatory reasons," Minji explained calmly. At that moment, Sarah and Brad appeared from the hallway. They had heard voices and come out to see what was happening. When Brad saw the police officer, his face went white. "What is going on, Robert?" Sarah asked. She looked at all the official people standing in the reception area. Robert turned to look at them. His expression had changed from confusion to anger. "Did you two make racist comments during an interview yesterday? Something about a candidate named Jerome Washington?" Brad and Sarah exchanged quick glances. The blood drained from Sarah's face. We were just having a private conversation. We did not know anyone was listening." "That does not matter," Minji said firmly. "You were on agency property during working hours. Your behavior represented this agency. And what you said was not just inappropriate. It was illegal discrimination." Daniel held up his hand. "Let me explain what is happening here. This suspension means that Tech Forward Recruiting Agency cannot conduct any recruiting business as of right now. You cannot interview candidates. You cannot place candidates with employers. You cannot represent yourself as a licensed recruiting agency. All current placements must be transferred to other agencies or handled directly between candidates and employers." Robert looked like he might be sick. "For how long? How long is this suspension?" "Until a formal hearing takes place. That hearing is scheduled for 2 weeks from today. At that hearing, you will have the opportunity to defend yourselves against the charges. But I need to be clear with you, Mr. Chen. The evidence against your agency is substantial. This is not a minor violation," Daniel said. Minji pulled out her tablet. "I am going to show you some of what I found." She played the audio clip of Sarah saying, "Did you notice how he talks? Very urban. I am not sure our corporate clients would respond well to that style." Sarah made a small sound like a gasp. Brad looked down at his feet. Robert just stared at the tablet screen in horror. Minji continued, "That is just the beginning. I have video of the entire conversation after Mr. Washington left the room. I have similar evidence from other interviews. This was not an isolated mistake. This was a pattern of discriminatory behavior. I did not know they were doing this," Robert said weakly. I run an honest business. I have never discriminated against anyone. You are responsible for your employees' actions, Mr. Chen. They represent your agency. When they discriminate, your agency discriminates, Daniel explained. Now we need to discuss the next steps. Daniel pulled out another document. You must post this notice on your front door and on your website immediately. It informs the public that your license has been suspended and explains that complaints can be filed with the State Labor Board. You must also contact all your current clients and inform them of the suspension within 24 hours. Robert took the paper with a shaking hand. This will destroy my business. My clients will leave. My reputation will be ruined. That may be true. But the law is very clear. Discrimination is not acceptable. When agencies break these laws, there are serious consequences, Daniel said. He did not sound mean, just matter of fact. This was simply how the system worked. Sarah suddenly spoke up. We did not mean anything by those comments. We were just talking. Jerome Washington was not qualified for our clients. That is all. We made a professional judgment. Minji turned to face Sarah directly. Then why did you mock his voice? Why did you suggest his accomplishments were due to affirmative action rather than his actual abilities? Why did you discuss making sure there was no paper trail of your decision? If this was simply about qualifications, you would have documented your professional concerns. But you did not do that. You rejected him because of his race and you tried to hide it. Brad finally spoke. His voice was quiet. Look, we know what our clients want. They want people who fit a certain image. We were trying to match candidates with what clients are looking for. If your clients want to discriminate, that is illegal too. You cannot claim you were just following client preferences when those preferences are based on race. That is not a defense. That is actually evidence of systematic discrimination, Minji said. Robert turned to Sarah and Brad. His face was red with anger now. Get out. Both of you. You are fired. Pack your things and leave immediately. Robert, wait, Sarah started to say. No, you have destroyed my business. Everything I built for 8 years is gone because of what you did. Get out now. Robert's voice echoed through the office. Other employees had gathered in doorways watching the scene unfold. Sarah and Brad walked back to their offices without another word. The police officer followed them to make sure they collected only their personal belongings and did not take any agency files or equipment. Minji pulled out 2 more envelopes. Mr. Thompson and Ms. Mitchell, these are for you. She handed each of them an envelope. Your individual recruiter licenses are also being suspended. You cannot work as recruiters anywhere in this state until the hearing. Brad opened his envelope and read the document inside. My license? But I need this to work. How am I supposed to make a living? You should have thought about that before you discriminated against job candidates. Minji said simply. Your actions have consequences. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but they were angry tears. This is not fair. We did our jobs. We placed candidates successfully for years. One mistake and our entire careers are over. This was not one mistake, Minji corrected her. My investigation found evidence of discrimination in multiple interviews. Jerome Washington filed a formal complaint. We have contacted other candidates who may also file complaints. Your behavior was not a one-time error. It was a pattern. Daniel addressed Robert again. Mr. Chen, you will receive additional documentation about the hearing process. You have the right to legal representation. You can present evidence and testimony in your defense, but I want to be very clear. The burden of proof is on you to show why your license should be reinstated. The state has substantial evidence of violations. Robert nodded numbly. He looked like he had aged 10 years in the past 10 minutes. His entire business was collapsing around him. What about my other employees? The ones who did nothing wrong? Do they lose their jobs too? Your other employees can seek employment at other agencies. They are not being punished, but they cannot work here while the suspension is in effect. You need to inform them today, Daniel said. Minji felt a small amount of sympathy for Robert. He seemed genuinely shocked by what Sarah and Brad had done, but sympathy did not change the law. He owned the agency. He was responsible for what happened there. He should have been monitoring his recruiters more carefully. He should have created a culture where discrimination was unacceptable. Sarah and Brad emerged from their offices carrying boxes with their personal items. The police officer walked behind them. They kept their eyes down as they walked through the reception area. Neither of them looked at Robert or anyone else. They just wanted to leave. As they reached the glass doors, Sarah stopped and turned around. "Robert, I'm sorry. We really are. We never meant for any of this to happen." Robert just shook his head. He did not say anything. Sarah and Brad left. Daniel handed Robert one more piece of paper. "This is the fine schedule. There is a $50,000 penalty for the license suspension. If your license is permanently revoked at the hearing, there will be additional fines. Payment information is included." $50,000? Robert's voice was barely a whisper. "Yes. Discrimination is expensive, Mr. Chen. That is intentional. The fines are meant to discourage this behavior," Daniel explained. Minji stepped closer to Robert. Her voice was gentler now. "Mr. Chen, I understand this is difficult, but you need to understand something important. Jerome Washington is a highly qualified professional. He has 8 years of experience. He graduated with honors from a prestigious university. He was perfect for the positions you were trying to fill. Your recruiters rejected him solely because of his race. Think about that. He lost an opportunity because of discrimination. That is the real harm here." Robert nodded slowly. "Can I see the video? I need to understand exactly what they said." Minji looked at Daniel, who nodded. She pulled up the full video clip on her tablet. She showed Robert the entire conversation between Sarah and Brad after Jerome left the room. Robert watched in silence. As the video played, his expression changed from shock to disgust to sadness. When it ended, Robert looked up at Minji. "I did not know they felt this way. I did not know they were doing this. I thought I was running an ethical business." "You may not have known, but it was your responsibility to know. You should have been monitoring your recruiters. You should have created clear policies against discrimination. You should have trained your staff properly. The fact that you did not know is part of the problem, not an excuse," Minji said. Robert's shoulders slumped. "You are right. This is my fault too. I was so focused on making placements and earning money that I did not pay attention to how my recruiters were actually treating candidates." Daniel checked his watch. "We need to finish the formal service of papers. Mr. Chen, do you understand everything that has been explained to you today?" "Yes, my license is suspended. I cannot operate. I have to inform clients and employees. I have to post the notice. There is a hearing in 2 weeks. I owe $50,000 in fines," Robert recited mechanically. "Correct. Do you have any questions?" Daniel asked. "Just one. Is there any way to fix this? Any way to make this right?" Robert asked. Daniel was quiet for a moment. "That depends on what happens at the hearing. If you can demonstrate that you have taken serious steps to change your agency's practices, that might influence the decision. But Mr. Chen, I want to be honest with you. The evidence is very strong. Most agencies in your situation end up losing their licenses permanently." Robert nodded. "I understand." Minji, Daniel, and the other officials left the office. As they walked to the elevator, Minji looked back through the glass doors one last time. She could see Robert standing alone in the reception area, still holding the suspension papers. Other employees were gathered around him asking questions. His whole world had just changed. In the elevator going down, Daniel turned to Minji. "Good work on this case. Your attention to detail made all the difference. Without that video evidence, this would have been much harder to prove. I was just doing my job, but I am glad we caught them. How many other candidates might they have discriminated against if we had not stopped them?" Minji said. "We will never know for sure, but at least they cannot hurt anyone else now." Daniel replied. When Minji got back to her office, she called Jerome. "Mr. Washington, I wanted to let you know that the suspension has been served. Tech Forward can no longer operate as a recruiting agency. Sarah Mitchell and Brad Thompson have been fired and their individual licenses have been suspended." Jerome was quiet for a moment. "That was fast. I filed my complaint this morning and they are already shut down. We moved quickly because the evidence was so clear. Your complaint combined with what I witnessed made this an easy case to act on. The formal hearing is in 2 weeks. You will need to testify, but the suspension is immediate and final until that hearing," Minji explained. "Thank you, Ms. Park. Thank you for believing me. Thank you for doing something about it," Jerome said. His voice was thick with emotion. "You are welcome. But Mr. Washington, you should also thank yourself. You had the courage to file a complaint. Many people do not. They just accept what happened and move on. You stood up for yourself and for others who might have been hurt in the future. That took bravery, Minji said. After the call ended, Jerome sat at his desk at work. He had taken the afternoon off after his morning meeting with Minji, but he had come back to finish some projects. He stared at his computer screen without really seeing it. Everything felt surreal. This morning he had filed a complaint. This afternoon the agency was shut down. It all happened so fast. His phone buzzed with a text from Professor Collins. "I am proud of you. You did the right thing." Jerome smiled and texted back, "Thank you for pushing me to file the complaint." "I almost did not do it," the response came quickly. "But you did. That is what matters." Jerome thought about Sarah and Brad. They had lost their jobs and their licenses. Part of him felt satisfied that they were facing consequences. But part of him also felt strange about it. His complaint had ended their careers. Was that too much? Should he feel guilty? But then he remembered the audio clip. The way Sarah had mocked his voice. The way they questioned his qualifications. The way they discussed weeding people out without leaving evidence. No, he decided. They earned what happened. They made choices. Those choices had consequences. He had simply told the truth about what he experienced. Jerome returned to his work with a clearer mind. Tomorrow he would start looking for a new position through a different recruiting agency. Or maybe he would apply directly to companies. Either way, he knew his worth. He knew his qualifications. And he knew that what happened at Tech Forward said nothing about him and everything about them. The news spread through the recruiting industry within hours. Tech Forward Recruiting Agency, once a successful mid-sized firm, had been shut down for discrimination. Word traveled fast in professional circles. By Friday evening, dozens of people in the industry had heard about the suspension. By Monday morning, it was the main topic of conversation at recruiting firms across the city. Robert Chen spent the weekend making phone calls. He had to contact every client company and explain that Tech Forward could no longer serve them. Each conversation was painful. Some clients were sympathetic. Most were simply worried about their own hiring needs and immediately started looking for other agencies. "I am very sorry for the inconvenience. I can recommend several other reputable agencies who can take over your placements," Robert said over and over. His voice sounded tired and defeated. Several clients asked what happened. Robert had to explain about the discrimination investigation. He could hear the change in their tone immediately. They went from concerned to distant. No company wanted to be associated with discrimination, even indirectly. By Monday, Robert had lost 90% of his client base. The remaining 10% were personal friends who felt bad for him, but even they said they would need to work with other agencies going forward. Sarah Mitchell spent the weekend applying for jobs. She sent her resume to 15 different recruiting firms. By Tuesday, she had received 3 responses. All 3 were rejections. The recruiting community was small. Everyone had heard about Tech Forward. Everyone knew she was one of the recruiters involved. No one wanted to hire her. One rejection email was more direct than the others. "Thank you for your interest in our company. However, given recent events regarding discriminatory practices at your previous employer, we do not feel you would be a good fit for our team. We pride ourselves on inclusive hiring practices." Sarah read that email 5 times. She felt anger and shame mixing together in her chest. She wanted to explain that she was not a bad person, that she had just made a mistake, that everyone deserved a second chance. But she knew those explanations would not matter. Her actions had consequences. Brad Thompson had similar experiences. He applied to jobs outside of recruiting, hoping to start fresh in a different field. But employers searched his name online. Articles about the Tech Forward suspension mentioned him by name. His LinkedIn profile, which used to get messages from recruiters every week, was suddenly quiet. No one wanted to touch him professionally. He sat in his apartment one evening and thought about how quickly everything had fallen apart. One conversation. One moment of saying what he really thought instead of staying professional. That was all it took to destroy his career. He thought about Jerome Washington, the man whose interview had triggered everything. Brad tried to tell himself that Jerome was too sensitive, that people were overreacting, that this was all blown out of proportion. But deep down he knew the truth. He had judged Jerome based on race. He had discriminated, and now he was paying the price. While Sarah and Brad struggled with their new reality, Jerome was experiencing something unexpected. His story had gotten attention. Minji had mentioned the case to a reporter friend who wrote about employment issues. The reporter contacted Jerome and asked if he would be willing to share his experience. Jerome agreed. The article came out on Wednesday. It was titled, "State Shuts Down Recruiting Agency After Compliance Officer Witnesses Discrimination on Camera." The article told Jerome's story. It explained how Minji had been conducting a routine inspection and witnessed the discrimination in real time. It detailed how Jerome's complaint had arrived just as the investigation was reaching its peak. It described the emergency suspension and what it meant for the industry. The article included a quote from Jerome. "I have experienced subtle discrimination before, but this was different. Hearing the evidence of what was said about me when I was not in the room was painful, but also validating. It confirmed that I was not imagining things. I hope my experience helps other people feel empowered to speak up when they face discrimination." The article also included a quote from Minji. "This case shows why surprise compliance inspections are so important. Without the video evidence, it would have been very difficult to prove what happened. Agencies need to know they are being watched and that discriminatory behavior will have serious consequences." By Thursday, Jerome's phone was ringing constantly. 3 different recruiting agencies called him, all wanting to help him find a position. A Fortune 500 technology company reached out directly. They had seen the article and were impressed by Jerome's qualifications and his courage in speaking up. They wanted to interview him for a senior engineering position with a focus on leading diversity and inclusion initiatives in their technical hiring process. Jerome took the interview. The company was genuine and professional. They asked about his technical skills, his leadership experience, and his vision for creating more inclusive hiring practices. They did not treat him like a victim or a symbol. They treated him like a qualified professional who had valuable insights to offer. Jerome accepted their offer the following week. Meanwhile, Minji continued her investigation. Other candidates had come forward after seeing the news coverage. A woman named Keisha Brown called the labor board and told her story. She had interviewed with Tech Forward 3 months earlier. During the interview, she mentioned having 2 young children. Sarah and Brad had exchanged looks. After the interview, Keisha never heard from them again, despite being told she was a perfect fit. Minji reviewed the video footage from Keisha's interview. Sure enough, after Keisha left, Brad and Sarah had discussed how mothers with young children were not committed to their careers. They talked about how she would probably need time off for sick kids or school events. They decided not to place her despite her excellent qualifications. Keisha filed a formal complaint. She would testify at the hearing along with Jerome. A man named David Nguyen also came forward. He had interviewed for a marketing position. During the interview, Sarah kept steering the conversation toward technical roles. She said things like, "With your background, have you considered IT positions? And a lot of our tech clients are looking for people with your skills." David had a marketing degree and 8 years of marketing experience. But Sarah seemed unable to see him as anything other than a potential tech worker. David had left the interview feeling frustrated and stereotyped. He filed a complaint. An older candidate named Patricia Wilson reached out as well. She was 56 years old with 25 years of human resources experience. Brad had told her during the interview that the agency's clients usually wanted people with fresh energy and adaptability to new trends. He suggested that younger candidates might be a better fit for the fast-paced corporate culture their clients preferred. Patricia had known immediately that these were code words for age discrimination. Patricia filed a complaint and agreed to testify. By the time the hearing date arrived, there were 5 candidates ready to share their experiences. Minji had video evidence to support each of their stories. The pattern was undeniable and overwhelming. The formal hearing took place in a large conference room at a government building. There was a 3-person panel that would make the final decision about Tech Forward's license. Robert Chen was there with his attorney. Sarah and Brad were there with their own attorney, a different one because their interests conflicted with Robert's. Jerome, Keisha, David, and Patricia were all there as witnesses. Professor Collins came to support Jerome. Minji was there to present her evidence. The hearing lasted 4 hours. Minji presented her investigation findings first. She showed video clips from multiple interviews. She displayed the placement data showing the pattern of discrimination. She explained the previous complaints that had been dismissed years earlier. The evidence was methodical and devastating. Then the candidates testified. Jerome went first. He described his qualifications, his interview experience, and how it felt to learn that his instincts about the interview had been correct. He spoke clearly and calmly. He did not exaggerate or make emotional appeals. He just told the truth. Keisha described being dismissed as a candidate because she was a mother. David explained how he had been stereotyped based on his ethnicity. Patricia talked about age discrimination. Each story built on the others, creating a picture of an agency that systematically rejected qualified candidates for illegal reasons. Robert Chen's attorney tried to argue that Robert had not known about the discrimination and should not lose his entire business because of two employees' mistakes. The attorney pointed out that Robert had fired Sarah and Brad immediately and was willing to implement new training and oversight procedures. But the panel was not persuaded. The chair of the panel, a retired judge named Margaret Henderson, spoke directly to Robert. Mr. Chen, you are correct that you did not personally make those discriminatory comments. However, you owned and operated this agency for 8 years. You were responsible for creating a culture of compliance. You were responsible for training your employees. You were responsible for monitoring their behavior. The fact that you did not know what was happening is a failure of leadership, not an excuse. Sarah and Brad's attorney tried a different approach. He argued that his clients had made mistakes but had not violated any written policies. He said they were just trying to match candidates with client preferences. He suggested that private conversations should not be held against them. Margaret Henderson cut him off. Counselor, the law does not care whether discrimination happens in writing or in spoken words. It does not care whether it happens in a formal meeting or a private conversation at work. Discrimination is illegal regardless of the format. Your clients clearly and deliberately rejected qualified candidates based on protected characteristics. They even discussed avoiding a paper trail to hide their discrimination. That shows intent and consciousness of wrongdoing. After hearing all the testimony and evidence, the panel deliberated for 40 minutes. When they returned, Margaret Henderson read their decision. After reviewing all evidence and testimony, this panel finds that Tech Forward Recruiting Agency engaged in systematic and intentional discrimination against job candidates based on race, ethnicity, gender, age, and family status. The evidence shows a pattern of discriminatory behavior over an extended period of time. The agency failed to maintain basic ethical standards required of licensed recruiters. She continued, therefore, we make the following rulings. First, the emergency suspension of Tech Forward Recruiting Agency's license is made permanent. The agency is prohibited from operating as a recruiting firm in this state. Second, Mr. Robert Chen may apply for a new license after completing 200 hours of anti-discrimination training and paying all fines. However, he may not use the Tech Forward name or brand. Third, Sarah Mitchell and Brad Thompson have their individual recruiter licenses permanently revoked. They may not work as licensed recruiters in this state. Fourth, Tech Forward must pay a total fine of $75,000. This includes the initial $50,000 penalty plus $25,000 in additional fines, based on the number of violations found. The room was silent as Margaret finished reading. Robert put his head in his hands. Sarah started crying quietly. Brad sat frozen, staring at nothing. Their attorneys looked disappointed but not surprised. The evidence had been overwhelming. Margaret addressed everyone in the room one final time. I want to be very clear about why this panel takes such a strong stance. Employment discrimination does real harm to real people. It denies opportunities to qualified individuals based on characteristics that have nothing to do with their abilities. It perpetuates inequality. It violates the basic principle that everyone deserves fair treatment. Agencies like Tech Forward serve as gatekeepers to employment. When those gatekeepers discriminate, they compound the harm. This panel will not tolerate such behavior. After the hearing, Jerome stood outside the building with Professor Collins, Keisha, David, and Patricia. They had never met before this process, but they felt a connection now. They had all experienced the same injustice. They had all found the courage to speak up. They had all been heard and believed. I am glad I filed the complaint, Keisha said. For a long time, I just tried to forget about that interview. I told myself it probably was not discrimination, that maybe they just found better candidates. But it was discrimination, and now there is a record of it. David nodded. Same. I almost did not come forward when the labor board contacted me. I thought maybe I was being too sensitive. But watching the video of my interview, Hearing what they said about me, that made it clear. They judged me based on my race, not my qualifications. Patricia smiled. I have been in the workforce for over 30 years. I have experienced discrimination many times, but this is the first time I have seen real consequences happen. Maybe things are changing, Jerome agreed. I hope so. I hope our experience helps other people know they are not alone and that they have rights. Minji joined their group. I want to thank all of you for your testimony today. You helped create an important precedent. Other agencies will hear about this case. They will know that discrimination has consequences. Over the following weeks, the industry did hear about the case. The Tech Forward hearing became a training example for recruiting agencies across the state. Labor board officials used it in compliance seminars. Recruiting firms updated their policies and increased their oversight of interview processes. Several agencies installed camera systems in their interview rooms specifically to protect candidates and ensure accountability. Jerome settled into his new role at the Fortune 500 company. His job was exactly what he had been looking for. He led technical teams, worked on interesting problems, and also helped develop better diversity and inclusion practices for hiring. His personal experience gave him credibility and insight that made his recommendations powerful. He was invited to speak at an industry conference 6 months after the hearing. His topic was recognizing and addressing bias in hiring processes. He talked about his tech-forward experience. He explained the subtle signs of discrimination that candidates often notice but cannot prove. He emphasized the importance of accountability and transparency. Discrimination is not always obvious, Jerome told the audience of HR professionals and recruiters. Sometimes it is just a shift in energy, a change in tone, questions that become shorter, eye contact that disappears. Candidates often feel these changes but have no way to prove what happened. That is why systems of accountability matter. That is why oversight matters. That is why video recordings, thorough documentation, and strong enforcement of anti-discrimination laws matter. The audience gave him a standing ovation. After his talk, dozens of people came up to share their own experiences with discrimination or to ask how they could improve their hiring practices. Jerome realized that his painful experience had created an opportunity to help many other people. That felt meaningful. Minji received a commendation from the State Labor Board for her thorough investigation and quick action on the Tech Forward case. Her supervisor, Daniel, nominated her for the state's Public Service Award, which she won the following year. But for Minji, the real reward was simpler. She had done her job well. She had protected vulnerable people. She had upheld the law. That was enough. Robert Chen eventually completed his anti-discrimination training. He paid all the fines. He applied for a new recruiting license under a different business name 18 months after the Tech Forward suspension. His application was approved with conditions. He had to submit to quarterly compliance reviews for 3 years. He had to maintain camera systems in all interview rooms. He had to complete annual training on fair hiring practices. Robert built a much smaller agency than Tech Forward had been. He was more careful now. He monitored his recruiters closely. He created clear written policies against discrimination. He fired someone immediately when they made an inappropriate comment about a candidate's appearance. He learned his lesson the hard way, but he did learn it. Sarah Mitchell never worked in recruiting again. She took a job in retail management. She avoided talking about her past career. When people asked why she changed fields, she said she wanted to try something new. She did not mention Tech Forward or the discrimination case. She had learned to keep her biases to herself. But she had not really examined or changed them. She just hid them better. Brad Thompson moved to a different state and tried to restart his recruiting career under a different name, but background checks revealed his history. He struggled to find work in his field. Eventually, he became a sales representative for an office furniture company. He was bitter about how his career had ended. He blamed Jerome for being too sensitive. He blamed Minji for being too aggressive in her investigation. He blamed everyone except himself. The case became part of employment law classes at universities. Law professors used it as an example of effective enforcement and the importance of documentation in discrimination cases. Business ethics classes discussed the responsibilities of managers to create inclusive workplaces. Human resources textbooks included it as a case study. 5 years after the hearing, Jerome was promoted to vice president of engineering at his company. He had built a reputation as an excellent technical leader, who also championed fairness and inclusion. He mentored young engineers of color, helping them navigate their careers and recognize their worth. He taught them about their rights. He encouraged them to speak up when they experienced discrimination. One of his mentees, a young black woman named Angela, came to him with a story that sounded familiar. She had interviewed at a company and felt something shift during the conversation. The interviewers had become cold and dismissive without explanation. She did not know if it was discrimination or just her imagination. Jerome listened carefully. Then he said, "Trust your instincts. If something felt wrong, it probably was wrong. Document everything. If you decide to file a complaint, I will support you. And regardless of what you decide, know that this experience says nothing about your qualifications or your worth. You are talented and capable. Do not let anyone make you doubt that." Angela thanked him. She left his office feeling stronger and clearer. She decided to file a complaint with the State Labor Board. Her case was assigned to a new compliance officer who had learned about the Tech Forward case during training. The officer took Angela's complaint seriously and conducted a thorough investigation. The cycle of accountability continued. Each person who spoke up made it slightly easier for the next person. Each case that was investigated thoroughly sent a message that discrimination would not be tolerated. Each agency that faced consequences made other agencies more careful about their practices. The system was far from perfect. Discrimination still happened. Many cases went unreported. Many candidates suffered in silence. But progress was being made step by step, case by case, person by person. Jerome thought about all of this as he sat in his office on the 5th anniversary of his Tech Forward interview. He had come so far since that day. He had turned a painful experience into meaningful change. He had used his voice to help others find theirs. His phone buzzed with a text from Professor Collins. "Saw your name in the Trade Journal article about diversity leaders in tech. Very proud of you, as always." Jerome smiled and texted back, "Thank you for believing in me and pushing me to file that complaint. It changed everything." The response came quickly. "You changed everything. You had the courage to speak up. That is what mattered." Jerome looked out his office window at the city below. Somewhere out there, someone was probably sitting in a job interview feeling that familiar shift in energy, feeling the coldness replace warmth, wondering if they were imagining things or if something was really wrong. He hoped they would trust their instincts. He hoped they would document their experience. He hoped they would speak up. And he hoped that when they did, someone like Minji Park would be there to listen and believe them. That was how change happened. Not all at once. Not perfectly. But person by person, case by case, moment by moment. People had to be willing to stand up for what was right, even when it was uncomfortable or scary. They had to be willing to hold others accountable. They had to be willing to create systems that protected the vulnerable and punished discrimination. Jerome had done that. Minji had done that. Keisha, David, and Patricia had done that. Together, they had made the world slightly more fair. That was something worth doing. That was something worth being proud of, and that was something Jerome would continue to do for the rest of his career.